Hi everyone, my name is Holly and I am an author's worst nightmare. Ever since I can remember, I have been a series binger. Not all the time, but it definitely occurs frequently. What this means is that I wait until the entire series is out before I even go on to the first book, and then I just read the series back to back all in one go. And I love it. It's one of my all-time favorite things to do. I absolutely love immersing myself into one fantasy world in a long period of time. I absolutely hate having to wait 1 year, 2 years, or even 3 years for the next installment. Yes, I know it's very selfish of me, and I'll get to the reason for that in a second. It's not like I have a bad memory, it's just I forget details like my feel for the world, or I'll forget the personalities of the characters, my feelings toward those characters, where they are in the world, and when that happens, I will typically not enjoy the next installment as much. And that hurts. That really hurts. For example, Dance of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson. I freaking loved this. But after having to wait a year for the sequel, which by the way, I freaking have, I pre-ordered it. It's been out for a while, but I haven't read it. Because I forget a lot from this first installment, and I know if I go into this without a fresh recap, which a lot of books don't have, I'm not going to enjoy it as much. But if I had read these back to back in a matter of like a week, they'd probably both be 5 stars. And honestly, even a recap doesn't help that much because that's not going to tell me my emotions toward the book, toward certain scenes, you know what I mean? And reading these back to back, my emotions and feelings toward this book would have rolled right into this one. So as a reviewer for many publishers, this is not a good thing. As a happening booktuber, I should be reviewing new releases for you so that I can tell you guys if they are poo or not. And I do actually, I do that pretty often. For instance, I read The Bard's Blade in January as a ARC. I read The Last Smile in Sunder City. I recently read Mexican Gothic, even though that was a standalone. I will always read Joe Abercrombie as soon as the book comes into my hands, but I'll be honest, A Little Hatred might need a reread because I want to fully enjoy the next book in that series, 100%. I'll read Josiah Bancroft immediately, Nicholas Eames, Alexei Harrow. So you might be wondering, why is it selfish of me to binge read at once? Why does this make me an author's / publisher's worst nightmare? Well, first off, pre-orders make a huge difference, from being on a best bookseller list to a new book contract, or being at the top of the list on like Amazon or Goodreads. You know, that pretty banner like best sci-fi ever. And not to be egotistical, but being someone who has, you know, a following, I could help you. I could help those authors. I don't know what this is. Reading a new book immediately for them and the publishers is really going to get their book noticed. There's definitely a certain window of time that is like the sweet spot, and I am killing their dreams. That's being dramatic, but you get what I mean. So to make myself feel better, I'm just going to say that, hey, I'm promoting authors for a big length of time all at once. That's the way that I show my love. So today I have a list of pros and cons of binge reading. And yes, surprisingly, there are cons to this, and I really had to delve deep into my brain to get them, but they exist. So starting with the pros list, number 1 is there's no pondering on what book to read next. That's right, mood reading, who knew her? If you start a series and you love it, then you can immediately move on to the sequel. It's great, no stress. Number 2, you know exactly what happened in the previous book, so you don't have to go and reread a review to remind yourself, which doesn't even help in the first place. That pro's an obvious one, but it's also the best one. Number 3 is you get so engrossed into the fantasy world that you totally forget about the real one. Self-explanatory, real life, boring, but totally immersing yourself into one book after another and after another. That's like eating a bottomless bowl of Kraft mac and cheese. Don't judge me. The next one is that you fully get invested into the characters and their storylines. Staying within a few characters' heads throughout a whole series binge is seriously so fun. It makes me appreciate them and their circumstances even more. Typically a book ends and you're sad and you have to leave the characters hanging there in the balance for a freaking year or more. But nah. If you have the next installment on hand, you can fix that problem right then and there. That leads me into the next very obvious but very important pro, that is, you don't have to wait a whole year for the next installment. Oh, sweet victory. I cannot imagine being a Game of Thrones book fan. It's one of the reasons why I haven't started Game of Thrones at all, because of how long you have to wait for the last 2 books. Okay, yeah, I'm pretty positive that Winds of Winter will be published within the next year, maybe early next year. Fingers crossed, right? But then the likelihood of A Dream of Spring coming out, maybe another 10 years. Probably. And I don't want any part of that. I don't want to experience that feeling, especially with how shitty the show ended. no. Get that off my plate. The next pro is that there's no confusing a current story, characters, or setting with another book that you've recently read or are currently reading. I personally don't think this has ever happened to me, but I've heard many others having to deal with it, but being a series binger like me, that's a big no. There is no risk to that. And the final pro is no cliffhangers. Haha, not today, Satan. Screw cliffhangers in a binge reader's world. They do not exist here. Not gonna make me angry or unsatisfied. So those are all the pros. Very good, very appetizing. But now let's go on to the cons. The first con is a biggie, and that is you get bored with the characters, setting, or plot after a while. I kind of feel like that might have happened with me when it came to reading the Spellslinger series by Sebastian de Castell. I binge read the 6 books in a span of a month, and I definitely got a little restless because it led me to not liking the final 2 books. Now that is to say the final 2 books were totally different than the rest of the series, and also the author didn't resolve the final plot and said that you had to come up with it yourself, but that was a rant for a whole different video. Trilogies are definitely the best in my opinion. Duologies are too short. So trilogies, or maybe even like 4 books, that is where it's at. The next con is that if you're not a quick reader and you're reading a longer series that could take you many months, then you're going to miss out on some newer releases. I'm definitely a culprit when it comes to this because on my shelves currently I have a lot of completed older series that I really want to focus on within the next few months. I have the Nevernight trilogy, the Powder Mage trilogy, also the Land of the Faithful, which is huge and is going to take me a lifetime to binge. So it does lead you to missing out on some newer releases that come out. But hey, if you have the mindset of a true binge reader, by the time you get to those new releases, that series will be completed and you can binge them. It's a never-ending cycle of goodness. The next con is if you've binge read, say, books 1 through 5, and the 6th one isn't out yet, it can be excruciating. This is a little bit of a cheatsy doodle binge reader moment. Definitely an impatient binge reader. I almost fell into this hole actually, now that I think about it, with the Spellslinger series. I started that series at the beginning of December and the final 6th one came out later that month. So I was really close on that one. The second to last con is that the hype and excitement for waiting for the next installment does not exist. It can definitely be lonely within the book community if you are not within that hype circle for waiting for a certain new release. From experience, being excited for the next Joe Abercrombie book with friends is so fun. So you're definitely missing out on that if you're waiting for an entire series to read at once. And the final con is that you can never go back to enjoy reading the series for the first time again, especially if you've binge read the series in such a short amount of time. A perfect example of this is, say someone has never read Harry Potter and they decide to binge read the series and they binge it in like 2 or 3 months, maybe even shorter. Your time is over.
Bloody hell!
That's kind of sad, especially comparing to people who read the series as they were coming out, which lasted for like 8 years. That's an insane difference, so you really have to think about stuff like that. Alrighty, so those are all of my pros and cons of being a series binge reader. And that is the end of this discussion. Please tell me down below, do you binge read series or do you read them as soon as they come out? I'm definitely a mixed bag of thoughts because just imagine if I had waited until the Kings of the Wild or the band series had all released, I would have never read Kings of the Wild. I would be a different person. Go ahead and give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed because that helps me out so much, and go ahead and subscribe. I upload videos every single week. Follow me on Instagram at Holly Hearts Books, on Twitter Holly Niece, and until we meet again, happy reading.